Swing big and save even bigger with our Big League Markdowns at Capital Ford in Santa Fe. This is your shot at big league deals, like a new 2025 Ford F-150 XLT 4-wheel drive Power Boost Hybrid, now up to $9,900 off MSRP, or a new 2026 Ford F-250 Super Duty, now up to $6,100 off MSRP. We're offering up home run deals all day, every day, with these Big League Markdowns at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Good evening and welcome to the Pit Press Live. It's a return of our Deep in the Dugout segment. And tonight, our very special guest is LSU signee Dylan Blancer. The Cueva, he just threw a new no-hitter last week against Sandia, struck out 11. And 2 weeks ago, a combined no-hitter against Santa Fe with Luke Watkins. The 23-3 Bears, who are the third seed in the state tournament, will take on Hobbs. They're 12-14. The 12-seeded Eagles will come. The 14-seeded Hobbs Eagles will visit La Cueva Friday at 4 p.m. and they're in the first round of the state baseball tournament. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. And while we do that, I also want to introduce our co-host and the owner of the Pit Press. Played some college baseball himself, Mr. Eric Moulton. Eric, thanks for hopping on, man. You know a lot more about baseball than I do, and you're going to be actually, Dylan, just so you know, I've got your first game Friday. I'm calling that game, and then my son and Eric Moulton will call the two games on Saturday. It's best of three, so it could be over by then. But so yeah, we'll all be out there. Myself on Friday, then my son and Eric on Saturday. Eric, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be back. Happy to be talking some baseball. I'm glad we got Deep in the Dugout back on. And Dylan Blancer, one of the most highly touted prospects, college recruits and commits to come out of the state of New Mexico in a long time. And I'm really glad to get him on the show. So, Ed, I'll hand it back to you.
You know, we talked about it last year, Dylan. Eric had mentioned this, and, you know, we just got caught up because we cover Lobo football, baseball. We just got caught up in Lobo stuff, man. And, you know, we're glad to have you on. But, you know, you're part of a no-hitter last week against Sandia and a combined no-hitter a few weeks ago with Luke Watkins against Santa Fe. Your coach, Gerard Pineda, who, won 7 state championships. We'll get into him later, ask about him. I have the deepest respect for Gerard. Him and I have gotten to be pretty good friends. Your slider, he said, has been working. I asked him when I called about you, has been working pretty well lately. What other pitches were working for you? When you have a slider that strikes out 11, you've got to feel pretty good about your pitch selection and you're going after batters and attacking them. What other pitches were working for you besides the slider?
Yeah, Saturday was kind of just one of those days where everything was going, which is nice as a pitcher. But I'd say besides the slider, the pitch that I was using the most was my sinker. And I kind of like to use that because it shows two different shapes of the fastball. So, you know, a hitter doesn't always know where it's going to move with the fastball. So coming in at the low 90s, that's another challenge for the hitters to pick up on top of the slider. I threw some changeups in there, which really worked well to kind of mirror off the sinker. So yeah, I mean, that was just kind of a day where everything was going, so it was nice.
You know, I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'll turn it over to Eric. But opponents and we've got the stats on the ticker there, are batting 0.96 against you. So you've got to feel pretty comfortable and confident when you go up there on the mound. And right now your batting average is 421 with 7 home runs and 44 RBIs. And you mentioned in college you will not be pitching, so you're producing on both sides, on the hill and at the bat, and you've got some tremendous firepower in that lineup. We'll get to that in a minute. But, I got to ask you this, Dylan, because we mentioned this. I remember being at the fields the last year when La Cueva was upset by Los Lunas. I was on one field, and I remember I heard a crowd like roar, And so coming into this week's game, you're the number 1-3 seed. Your last loss was against Cleveland on March 28th. Since then, the Bears have reeled off 12 straight wins. I would think probably the level of confidence has to be high going into this weekend series against Hobbs. There has to be a little bit of a chip on your shoulder because of last year. You might again, I told you this before we got on, La Cueva very well might have been the best team, but sometimes breaks of the game happen. They broke for Los Lunas that day, and then Sandia, the eventual champion. What's the mood in the La Cueva clubhouse going into the game against Hobbs on Friday?
Yeah, I mean, vibes are definitely really high. This is kind of the time of year that we've all been waiting for since, like you said, that Los Lunas game. So we're all super pumped to get out there and give it one last shot as a group. A lot of these guys, like Luke Feist, for example, I've been playing with him since I was 7 years old. So I got 1 or 2 more weeks with them, and all the guys, we're just trying to enjoy it and give it everything we got these last couple of weeks.
It's got to be very exciting. The state tournament only comes around once a year, and I remember the state championship. I told you I was doing PA when Coach Pineda, by the way, watched the game from the parking lots. I still remember. Man, that was some exciting stuff. Coach Pineda got ejected, and he was able to come back, and that was the Cleveland pitcher walked in the winning run, La Cueva winning 3-2 2 years ago. So you have to be pretty excited. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a loaded question for you, Dylan, but can you talk about the guys that play around you, the La Cueva squad, the boys, and you guys probably got a deep burn inside you, just wrapping up how last season finished and kind of coming out with a chip on your shoulder. But what can you say about the rest of the guys on the team? Probably some guys that you grew up playing Little League with that are kind of grew up playing together. And then the second part of the question, can you talk about the ABA community and maybe just the baseball community around Albuquerque and how you guys are all so well connected?
Yeah, starting with La Cueva, obviously, like you said, that Los Lunas game coming into the beginning of this year when we start practicing in August, there was kind of a different fire than usual. We all kind of really wanted to get back, all have been working since that time for this stage in the year. The guys, I think one that might get overlooked, but it's also kind of hard to, is Chase Qualler. He's our catcher. We would DH for him last year. And this year, he's hitting close to 500 with 9 homers. I'm super proud of Chase and what he's done. I think there's so many guys that have stepped up in different roles and have just done what they need to do to help contribute to the team and kind of find their piece of the puzzle. Another one that comes to mind is Mikey McMullen, a sophomore, our third baseman. He's stepped out there every single game with absolutely no fear. And just every single game, played everything he has, left it all out there. And he's been great for us. And then kind of going to that, the baseball community in Albuquerque, it's cool, kind of how tight knit baseball is here. I think it kind of gets overlooked on national level, how much of a baseball state New Mexico really is. Because we got a lot of good talent here. And it's cool that, I've been able to become friends with a lot of these guys from around the state. Jack Byers from Artesia, who's going to Arizona, Del Angel, who's going to Oklahoma, Burdette and Feist on our team, UNM and Oregon State. Guys from every school. There's guys on pretty much every school across the city and across the state, I've played with or know to some level. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. Just the talent. New Mexico is kind of a diamond in the rough, and Coach Birmingham has been saying that for such a long time, even at his days at New Mexico Junior College. But kind of staying down that lane with you committing to LSU and the Albuquerque and the New Mexico natives that have been on that team. The big name is a guy like Alex Bregman, and then Monster Milam down south, who was in Las Cruces, is now the starting shortstop for LSU. How much of those guys had an impact on you, just maybe kind of being a voice in your head or kind of guiding you through the baseball scene, and how much of an influence did they have on you committing to LSU?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a huge influence. I grew up a little bit knowing the Bregman family. Our parents know each other, or my parents know Alex's parents. I mean, I talked to Monster a decent amount on my visit. But I think a lot of it was kind of being able to be that next guy up from New Mexico to kind of carry on that legacy out in Baton Rouge. It's a cool feeling. I mean, it's been well represented for sure. You look at Bregman, what he did at LSU. He was a second overall pick, and then Monster this year. He was our starting shortstop this year and last year, and he's been balling out ever since. So it's cool to kind of have those guys to follow after who've kind of paved the way for New Mexicans to Baton Rouge. So I'm excited to kind of be that next guy, and maybe start a little bit of a pitching legacy too.
You mentioned that, and one of our viewers, Ice Baby, is also mentioned you're going to join Stephen Malam at LSU. I remember watching him at the state tournament a couple years ago. So that's another New Mexican, and I think you're right about the New Mexico being a underrated. I was able to cover Connie Mack several years ago, and you played out there with ABC, and that's a great tournament. So I think you're right. New Mexico certainly has its share, and a Cueva. Gosh, man, I was teased Coach Pineda and Coach Gracie. They built a great. Coach Pineda's been there since 2009, 2010. Has built a great program there. Much respect to him. You started out as a catcher, and what made and I heard you a little bit. What made the transition? And they say this about you: the ball comes out effortlessly with velocity. You have a lot of natural talent, man. You do, and that's something you're blessed with. And all the great ones are, Dylan. They are, man. But what made that transition so easy from catcher to pitcher?
I think one thing was kind of being able to, I guess, call pitches from behind the plate and translate that to the mound. I think being behind the plate kind of gives you a different perspective that's, beneficial to be able to use on the mound. And I think, part of that ball coming out easy in my hand, I think a lot of that is from catching and throwing down to second base, kind of having a really quick release. And that's something I've been told a lot is it's really hard to pick out the ball coming out of my hand. Just kind of I kind of like short arming almost, and that's from catching. So I think that's one thing directly that catching's really benefited me from that really helps me today.
Our very special guest is LSU signee Dylan Blomker. The Cueva Bears will take on the Hobbs Eagles this weekend, Friday and Saturday at the Cuevas baseball field. The 23-3 La Cueva Bears will take on the 12-14 Hobbs Eagles. You've got a lot of pitching coaches. You've worked with ABA. You're working with college level pitching coaches. But one of the things I listened to you talk about was Coach Smith at La Cueva, and you mentioned that he lets you he calls the pitches, but he lets you shake off if you need to. But what I wanted to ask you was how instrumental has he been in your development, Coach Smith? You got a great staff there. Alex Dury, Ramon Gonzalez, Bill Gracie, Rick Engel, Phil Lay, Gerard Pineda, the head coach, and then Chad Smith. How important has Chad been to your development?
Yeah, I mean, Chad's been amazing. Kind of a funny story. So Chad was my camp counselor when I was like 4 years old. So I've known Chad since I was like 4. And then my sophomore year, he came in as our pitching coach. So that was definitely cool. But I mean, Chad's been a great guy. I mean, obviously, first off on the field, but also giving me advice for what's going to kind of come ahead with college. He played at UNM, so he kind of knows what it's like to step into a Division I program. So Chad's been great with that, giving me some kind of forewarnings of what to expect, what it's going to be like, and, what the level of competition's like.
Yeah, all these people are very instrumental. Yeah, they watch you. They watch you pitch. They watch your mechanics. They know about, if the arm is dragging or if you're not delivering the way you should be. But I got to say, I talked to Coach Gracie this afternoon, who I told you I've known. He's a Hall of Famer, man, New Mexico Sports Hall of Fame inductee. Coached last Cibola Baseball Championship was in 1983, and that was Coach Gracie. Also coached softball at UNM with Susan Craig. Refereed high school basketball and college basketball. He's an evaluator for the Mountain West as far as officials go. The guy's a legend to me, man. as a legend as a person more than anything. So when I called him this afternoon, he called back like that. He said to me that he just has nothing but the great things to say about you. You're the first one at practice, he said, the last one to leave, and you're always willing to help get the bats out. There's no big time in people. So I had to tell you that Coach Gracie thinks the world of you. He's seen you grow as a player and as a person, and that's what Coach Gracie thinks. I had to tell you that because, I wanted a quote. Somebody deep in the dugout. That's what the show's about. Coach Gracie is deep in the dugout, so I had to tell you that Coach Gracie thinks highly of you.
I appreciate that. That's nice of him. He's been my coach. He was like my first club ball coach actually when I was, I think, 7 with Luke Feist. Actually, he coached us when we were really young. So I've known him for a while too. So it's really nice to have him in the dugout.
He's impacted so many people in so many ways. As a coach, Cibola at UNM, officiating, evaluation of officials. I don't get to talk to Coach Gracie enough, and when we do, it's just like boom, catch up, pick up right where we left off. Go ahead, Eric. It's on mute.
Dylan, can you talk about the first time you were exposed to the club ball scene? I know that's kind of really taken off with ABA, but you were also a part of like the perfect game. You also played in a couple like All-American games. Can you talk about like the level of competition and you kind of seeing that for the first time? And were you kind of surprised or shocked at how good some of these players are from around the country?
Yeah, so the first time I really got exposed to kind of the national competition, I'd want to say I was probably around my freshman or sophomore year of high school, right at the beginning of it. And it was kind of just like I told my parents, like, I don't know how good I am, but I kind of just want to see where I stack up compared to people across the country. And I kind of went out there, obviously expecting the best or hoping for the best, but I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know where I was going to land. So I just kind of went out there with the mindset of, I'm a kid from New Mexico. I don't really have anything to lose. So I'm going to just go out here and give it everything I have. And I mean, it's been great. The relationships I've developed with people from across the entire country through club baseball, playing in all these tournaments. I mean, these are kids who are going to be, first round draft picks, go on to play in the SEC, big leaguers, probably a few all-stars in there. So it's been great to kind of, meet these guys and be around them. And also that we, share the same passion and love for baseball, and that we love to get better and we love to play, high intensity games and win.
And knowing what you know now, being exposed to that high level of competition, right? I think here locally in New Mexico and maybe even regionally, early on, you've kind of been known to be a flamethrower. I think you're topping at what, 98 now, 97, 98?
Yes, sir.
So knowing that now and kind of facing and having to up the competition, you developed that slider that Ed was talking about early in the show. How would you say that your approach to pitching and your psyche has kind of evolved over your high school career? And how would you say the best approach to attacking hitters?
Yeah. I mean, sophomore year, I was a little bit timid. Obviously up there, kind of a younger kid. And now it's kind of just developed into something that I'm pretty much fearless when I'm out there. I'm not afraid to go at you. I think I can beat you no matter who you are. That's kind of just been my approach these last few years. And I think that's something that's really helped take me to the next level. So, some advice I'd give is just, trust your stuff when you're up there. You can't have any doubt, because any doubt can lead to bad results for you, or, that can just lead to you giving in to what the hitter wants. So you just have to go up there, be fearless, think you're better than the hitter, even if it's not true. You just got to go up there and be fearless and let your stuff rip.
Well, I'm going to age myself with this next one, but Ed was talking about Coach Gracie. I actually graduated and played against Scott Gracie, his son, when he was at La Cueva. And that baseball team at La Cueva was probably, I think, the year or two before that, maybe the 2003 or 2004 team, they were ranked the number one team in the country in high school. And you talk about like Jordan Pacheco, James Parr, Zach Arnett behind the plate. I mean, you talk about some stud athletes. That was all before ABA got started. But now that ABA has kind of evolved and is kind of somewhat of a powerhouse, for those people that are listening and watching, like how big and what kind of a reputation does ABA have from other programs around the country?
Yeah, I mean, I've said Campos's names to many people around this country that have probably, never even been to New Mexico, and they know who he is. So Campos has done a great job developing kids here. I mean, we'll have pro guys come into ABA in the off season to get programming from him, and they're not from New Mexico. They just have heard Campos, is really good at what he does, and they'll come to get programming from him. So it's really nice to have this asset here in New Mexico of all places, because I mean, he's really, I mean, in my opinion, he's the best in the country at what he does, and it's pretty amazing to have him right here. So it's really cool when you can walk into ABA in the offseason and you're training among, Mitchell Parker, who's in the big leagues with the Nationals, Chase Silseth, who's in the big leagues with the Angels, Aiden May, who went to Sandia, who's in the Marlins farm system. So, I mean, there's so many guys that when you walk in there, it's like, wow. And, there's a lot of things you can kind of pick their brain on about.
Very cool. I have one more question, then I'll hand it back to Ed. But walk us through your recruiting process. Like when did these big schools start recruiting you? I'll just rattle off a few names. Well, obviously you committed to LSU, but Tennessee was in the mix, Texas A&M's, and I think Texas was also offering too as kind of being the big name programs. But these are programs that are not only competing for conference championships, but they're competing for national championships. What was that experience like, and maybe what stood out to you the most at some of these visits?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting, the recruiting process. So the recruiting rule changed my freshman year to where you couldn't talk to a school until August 1st of your junior year. So that kind of pretty much paused everything for about a year and a half for me. And then, I had a pretty good summer, sophomore year going into junior year. And I was kind of just wondering what was going to happen on August 1st when schools could reach out. And I was pretty happy to see when a lot of schools were kind of texting me and calling me. And then, LSU was kind of my dream school from the beginning of the recruiting process. That was kind of the school I always had my eyes set on. Like if I got an offer from them, that was a pretty high chance I was going to take it. And I mean, the three things I always said I wanted at a school was, the first thing was I wanted a school that was going to win, compete for a national championship every year. The second thing was I wanted a school that was going to develop me to be a big leaguer one day. And then the third thing was a school that, my parents were comfortable with, and, they could trust the coaching staff with me going off to college. And, LSU checked all those boxes. So it was pretty great.
Very cool. Ed?
We've talked a lot about coaching and, ABA and Coach Smith and Coach Gracie. But the guy at the Cueva who makes it all happen and has won 7 championships since he took the program over in 2009 and 2010 is Gerard Pineda. And I saw him. I talked to him at least 3 times or more a year. I see him at the Cueva events when we cover basketball or baseball. But I got to ask you, the guy's a fantastic coach, a great man. What's his tutelage meant to you when you're guiding you in your career, and you're ready to sign with LSU? What has his guidance meant?
Yeah, I mean, I was super thankful to have a high school coach like Coach Pineda. I feel like he's one of the best, if not the best, coaches in the state. I mean, he can help you from so many different aspects of baseball. Just kind of teaching me more about the game, the IQ of the game, how to play the game the right way. So, I'm so grateful for Coach Pineda and what he's done for these last 4 years. And I mean, I'm sure once I leave for college, be calling him to ask for advice. So, I mean, he's amazing to have as a resource. I mean, I'm really grateful, because I don't think a lot of people are blessed with a high school coach like that. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah, he's a tremendous man. All the respect in the world for him. But I got to ask you this. I heard you say this too. It's about being, you mentioned a good player, good academics, a good person. You mentioned that too. So I got to ask about your mom. We talk about coaches, ABA, but let's ask about your mom and dad, because someone guided you to be where you are now, the polite young man. And Coach Gracie said this too: no arrogance, no big time in people. You're just one of the guys, right? And there's going to be people that are looking at you in the majors someday, man. It's a good possibility that they're going to be saying, "Gosh, I remember when." So tell us a little bit about your development as a person came from somewhere. Tell us a little bit about mom and dad.
Yeah, I mean, from a young age, my parents have. I mean, I've always played sports, but sports has always been the last priority. The first thing's always been, I guess, kind of a tie for being a good person and being good in the classroom. And if that wasn't happening, then sports weren't going to happen. So that's kind of just been not a ask, but a requirement since I can remember. So I mean, it's just kind of what I've grown up always knowing. My mom's always told me, even now, just I mean, be a good person. You don't want to be remembered as kind of the a-hole that got around New Mexico. You want to be remembered as the guy that tried to help as many people as he could while he was here. So I'm really lucky to have a parent system like that. I mean, they've supported me in every single step of my baseball career. They've always, helped me whenever I needed it. They've never forced me to do anything in baseball. I've always just asked to do it, and they've said, "Yeah, we can help you get there." So I mean, I'm forever grateful for them, and I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am today without them.
Well, I'll tell you what, they've taught you well, just in the interviews that I've seen, and then the comments by Coach Gracie and Coach Pineda. You can tell that whatever they've said to you has definitely sunk in. And we all need guidance. We all need that the parental guidance. Sometimes we step into things, right, and they're there. And it sounds like your parents are just some special people. Now, I've got this quote from Coach Pineda. He and this whole senior group are a very special group. Dylan is a dynamic player, and more so, an incredible individual. He is humble, has a great work ethic. The sky's the limit for him. So that's what your coach thinks, man. And I think that as somebody's, Eric played on a state championship team at Capital, a basketball team in 2004. And sometimes there's the star players and I think Eric had a great team cohesiveness. And it's tough because you look at La Cueva baseball, and you mentioned, I heard you mention your Mount Rushmore of La Cueva athletes on another, and man, that was a great list. And Eric just listed some other Jordan Pacheco's, some other people. So when you're a part of a program and you very well are going to be in the pros, like Alex Bregman, who played at the academy, and you still have that attitude. I'm going to help you. You're not big time in people or ignoring people. I think that goes a long way. So kudos to mom and dad. They deserve a lot of credit. I like the part where you said if you weren't doing those kind of things, sports wasn't going to happen. And so it means something to you to also give back to the team, to your teammates, and not act like you're above them. And I think that goes a long way. We just got a couple more questions for you, and I've got one more, and I'm going to turn it back to Eric, and we'll wrap it up. Thanks again for being on with us. We really appreciate it. But I know this is a question you already asked, but I really enjoyed hearing it. Tell us some of your goals with the high school tournament, college, and eventually the pros.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I'd have to say is obviously this year's winning a state championship. I mean, that's pretty obvious. And I mean, as we go on the road, it's kind of the same thing. College, it's win a national championship, and professional, it's going to be win a World Series. So that's kind of what I've always loved to do, is just win. I mean, that's my favorite thing to do in the whole world. And then kind of beyond that, it's going to be obviously the big awards. I want to win a Cy Young. I want to try and be the next pitcher, win an MVP. I think the last one was Kershaw. So, I mean, I just want to really see how far I can go with baseball. I mean, it's just, honestly, it's still just the kid in me out there having fun, playing the game I love. I mean, that's really all it is. I just love to have fun playing the game. I love to win. I love to compete.
Yeah, man, for the love of the game, what would you do, right, for the love? And, 23-3, 12 straight wins. I think there's a little bit of a chip with this team. I'm sure there is. There is every year. It's expected La Cueva's going to win and be there, right? It's expected. So I'm looking forward to seeing how far your team advances in the state tournament. Eric, you got anything left for Dylan?
Yeah, I got a few rapid fire questions here, more on some fun ones. But if pitchers had a walkout song, what would your walkout song be?
Ooh. I would say 7 Nation Army by the White Stripes.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. My wife's a big music girl. She would appreciate that one. Second question is, if you weren't a baseball player, what sport would you try to excel the most at?
Ooh. So when I was younger, I was a big basketball player, but I think I also could have been really good at football. So I don't know which one, but probably football or basketball.
Uh, Ed would appreciate that one.
Oh, yeah.
And then last one here to older Dylan, senior LSU commit, kind of been through it, high school All American, perfect game All American, one of the top recruits in the whole country. What would that Dylan tell young Dylan, 4 or 5 years old, starting in T-ball? What would his advice be?
I mean, I think it would just be pretty simple. Just enjoy the game and maximize the amount of fun you have when you're out there. Baseball's not really a job, but it's a game, and I might be blessed enough to be able to play, a kid's game for a living. So I'm just really excited about that. And I mean, how blessed I've been to be in this position. So that's what I tell young Dylan is just have fun playing the game. Don't put pressure on yourself. Just go out there and play the game you love.
Very cool, man. It was a pleasure having you on the Pit Press, and I always tell this to these guests, and I always tell it to Ed and Nick, who are also a big part of this show. But this is the reason we started this thing. We like to get high school athletes on. Everyone's got their own story, and your story's still going, man. So good luck to you at LSU. Good luck to you, and probably the MLB draft someday. We'll be cheering for you and um, wishing good things for you to happen. So again, I want to appreciate for you for jumping on the show, Ed.
Dylan, thanks again, man. It was a pleasure interviewing you. But like Eric said, we at the Pit Press will definitely be following. I'll see you Friday, man. I'll come on the field and say hi, and I'm looking forward to that. And my son and Eric will have the call on Saturday, so definitely we'll come down and say hi. But we can't thank you enough for coming on with us, and we wish you all the luck in the state tournament and at LSU and in the future. We really do, and you got your head on the right place, mentored by some great people, and those starts with your mom and dad. Shoot, man, that's where it starts, right? And everybody else pitches in, but mom and dad cannot do without two great people like that. So once again, Dylan, thanks so much for being on with us.
For sure. Thank you guys for having me. I had fun.
You bet. We'll be back with Nick Nunez after these messages on the Pit Press Live.
Swing big and save even bigger with our big league markdowns at Capital Ford in Santa Fe. This is your shot at big league deals, like a new 2025 Ford F-150 XLT 4-wheel drive Power Boost Hybrid, now up to $9,900 off MSRP, or a new 2026 Ford F-250 Super Duty, now up to $6,100 off MSRP. We're offering up home run deals all day, every day, with these big league markdowns at Capital Ford in Santa Fe.
Good evening and welcome back to the Pit Press Live. I'm Ed Nunez along with our co-host Eric Moulton, and we're joined now by our third member of our Pit Press Live podcast, Nick Nunez. Nick, welcome to the show.
Dad, Eric, good to be with you guys. Great interview with Dylan Blancer, the pitcher from La Cueva. I tuned into the last part of it. I echo the sentiment of our commenters. What a great kid. Raised well, well-spoken. I think it was Steve Singletary, and I'll pull up his comment here. It was the last one. Love how well-spoken he is and how confident but not cocky he has been raised and mentored well. Great interview, guys. Yeah, I just echo everything that Steve said. Great interview, guys. Great to be with you both.
Eric, I wanted to get your thoughts. You're a baseball guy, Eric. You played college baseball, played for Capital. You know a lot more about baseball than either Nick or myself. And I appreciate you jumping on to be on with Dylan. And, it's another segment. We've got, I told Kenny Thomas this yesterday, we've got Road to the Pit, we've got Huddle Up, and we've got Deep in the Dugout. So we got 3 different platforms to bring high school athletes on. So, Eric, what did you think of Dylan?
Man, I'm a fan. I think I texted you last season, Ed, when we were kind of following the high school baseball scene. I know Nick was starting to call some games in the high school scene around New Mexico, and Dylan's name kept popping up, and I was like, man, this kid is going to be a stud one day. I didn't realize how good he was, and I'm I'm starting to be a fan of just the person Dylan is too. I think he's well above his age and maturity. He's headed to a great school. I echo what you were talking about, Ed, with his family stability and his parents raising him right, being well spoken. I think he's got a big future ahead, and I'll be a fan. I'll be rooting for him, and he's just going to add to another good, solid baseball player to come out of the state of New Mexico. It's hard not to cheer for a kid like that. So I know that you're going to get the game on Friday, but I'll be joining Nick in the booth on Saturday to check out Game 2 of the La Cueva Hobbs series. So I'll probably get a chance to meet him there. But really bright kid, and I'll be cheering for him, man. So I'm a fan now.
What a future this young man has. The way he pitches, and it's natural. It's a natural ability, and he's worked at it, no doubt about it. So looking forward to what he's going to accomplish in the future. We've got our Nick Nunez on, and Nick, some news today. You made the news. You made the article by Jeff Grammer about the bid to dismiss the public records lawsuit being denied. And Nick, I've got some questions, and you and I talked about it, and we'll talk about. Of course, there's particulars we cannot speak about, but one of the first questions, I know Eric's got some questions as well. Why is this lawsuit so important? And
the lawsuit.
Reasons why, Nick, about the whole thing. I probably just didn't give them enough information, so go ahead and tell them.
Yeah, the lawsuit was filed by the New Mexico Foundation for Open Government. They sued the University of New Mexico and New Mexico State University over a public records dispute. FOG made requests to UNM and NMSU for public records, including revenue sharing contracts, name, image, and likeness contracts. Those are just contracts between UNM or a third-party NIL collective and a student athlete or New Mexico State that offers them compensation in exchange for a license to market their name, image, and likeness, which basically just means the university can use their name, promote them in commercials, advertisements, things of that nature. This is not pay for play, as a lot of people have suggested. But anyway, FOG makes those requests to New Mexico State, to UNM. UNM and New Mexico State both tell FOG the public records requests are denied because they are trade secrets and they are student records protected under FERPA. I do not recall the exact name, but it's a federal statute passed by Congress that essentially says student or universities like UNM and New Mexico State can risk having their federal funding stripped if they give up student records. And student records has a very broad definition under FERPA. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations. I don't have the definition off the top of my head, but basically any kind of document that could reasonably identify a student athlete could potentially be considered an education record. And Judge Lujan yesterday did not make a ruling on that one way or the other. So that's what the universities tell FOG, and that's what this lawsuit is about. Why is it important? Dad, Eric, I think, you guys know this. A lot of what's being used to pay these student athletes, and I don't know all of this for sure. What I can speak to is what now athletic director Ryan Berriman has said on this show when he came on last year, June 19th, 2025. There are certain revenue sources that are being used to pay these NIL or these revenue sharing contracts between the university and the student athlete. Some of those being tickets, money from ticket revenue, money from the concession stands. What are you guys noticing? This gets to your question, Dad. What are you guys noticing when you go to a Lobo men's basketball game? We go, Dad, and we're fortunate enough to be credentialed media, but we go, And so we don't always go to the top bowl. But when I do, when I go buy you a water or M&Ms or whatever it is you want, you know how much I paid for a small box of M&Ms, much smaller than this box of crayons? It was like $7. Parking costs are up. Ticket prices are up. Part of that is to pay these revenue sharing contracts for the student athlete. So why is it important? The fan is investing in this student athlete. The university is saying, we need more. We need more donors. UNM's pitch, what is it? What's their campaign? You want to be a real one. Be a real one. Buy your season tickets. Donate to the university. Help us contribute. Let's be like the Green Bay Packers. I mean, that's what the university is telling you. But they don't want to tell you how much they're spending on their basketball payroll or their football payroll. The other issue, and this is part of the complaint and the claims asserted by Fogg, is that there could potentially be public money that's being used to fund some of these revenue sharing contracts. Public money being taxpayer money. I mean, Fernando Lovo, the former UNM athletic director, and Amber Burge, the former acting athletic director for New Mexico State University, they went to the Legislative Finance Committee back in, I think, August of last year and asked the legislature to put in money to UNM and NMSU so that they could help fund the costs of the House settlement, so they could start paying players, so they could start paying some of the back pay damages that they have to pay as part of the House settlement. And, you know, I'm not aware at this time, I don't know if it's publicly known, how much public money is being used to fund these revenue sharing contracts. I don't know how much it is. But even if it's not directly funding them, here's the thing. UNM and New Mexico State both get public money. If they get public money from the state legislature, from the taxpayers, it's appropriated out of the budget, wherever it comes from, and they're using that to do other things. But that money that would have been used for those other things is now being used for the revenue sharing contracts. Indirectly, the taxpayers are funding this revenue sharing contract, is basically what I'm saying, in part. So why is it important, Dad? There's huge public interest here. Us New Mexicans that live here, it's important that the universities be as transparent as they possibly can be under the law. And that's what Fogg's lawsuit really challenges. I know that was kind of long-winded, Dad, but that was my answer to your question.
Eric, you got something?
I got a question. So, Nick, this isn't new, right? This isn't something that is being challenged in the state of New Mexico. I almost feel like New Mexico might be a little late to the party because, I mean, do you know how many other lawsuits are happening around the country? Because this is happening in just about every state that has a major university that sponsors college athletics, right?
Yeah, man, there's been a lot of these legal challenges, and a lot of these legal challenges started before the universities could actually start paying their student athletes. A lot of these legal challenges have happened like in 2021 when it was third-party NIL collectives, similar to that of 505 Sports Venture Foundation here in Albuquerque, that used to be the NIL collective for UNM. I think they're still existing, but a lot of the time, these lawsuits challenge those kinds of contracts between a third party and a student athlete. That's not the university, and all that public funding, ticket revenue. That's not necessarily at issue in those kinds of contracts. But there were a lot of lawsuits back then, Eric. Now, what's different, what kind of determines whether there's a good case or not, is whether or not a state legislature has enacted an exemption in their public records law, which says people cannot get these kinds of documents. They are exempt under our public records law. We call it IPRA here in New Mexico. There's tons of variations throughout the country of what exactly that is in that particular state. But if they have a public records law that exempts these records, you're not seeing successful legal challenges in those states. But in states like New Mexico, where the law is less clear, and I think even you're starting to see changes or challenges to under some of those public records exemptions in other states. But in states like New Mexico, yes, Eric, there's lawsuits that are prevalent. Off the top of my head, I would refer people to Matt Baker. He's a journalist for The Athletic. If you go to his Twitter page, he released an article on March 26th of this year. I don't have the title off the top of my head, but I can get it. He kind of did a compilation, Eric, of like what's the status of the law nationwide. What he reported in March of 2026 was that there's at least 2 other active lawsuits going on right now. There's one in Louisiana and one in South Carolina. And I don't know off the top of my head if those are 2 of the states that have public records exemptions for these kinds of documents. So in answer to your question, there's at least 3 active that have been reported on that I know about. There's been lots of cases, Eric, where courts have found, I shouldn't say lots. I don't know. I haven't done a full extensive deep dive into the research to properly answer that question. But there's at least a couple decisions that have come out that have said these are protected records. You can't get them. They're student records. I don't know if there's been a finding that they're trade secrets, but yeah, that's kind of the status of the law around the country, Eric.
And last question, and maybe you did cover this already, but when this did go to the courtroom, UNM and New Mexico State collectively tried to get the case dismissed based off of 2 arguments, right? They failed at getting it dismissed because the arguments just didn't hold enough water, or what's your take there?
Yeah, so, Eric, we see this a lot happen, right, in court cases. Look at the Mountain West and Pac-12 litigation that some Lobo fans are familiar with. I mean, the Mountain West tried to dismiss the Pac-12's claims in that lawsuit, and that motion to dismiss was denied. What do I read into Judge Lujan's ruling from yesterday? Not much at all, to be honest with you. I think she just said there are enough facts stated on the face of the complaint that at this stage of the proceeding, the arguments raised by UNM and New Mexico State, they required more of a factual record. And what that means is that the parties, the lawyers, have got to exchange information. They get in discovery fights about what they're going to produce and what they're not going to produce. It gets drawn out. It takes months, sometimes years. I don't know what will happen in this case. I have no idea. But there's a good chance that it could take some time.
That was my question, Nick, the timetable. And you just mentioned that because there could be motions and more motions. So you're saying that it could be a while.
Yeah, I think so. Dad. Yeah, there's no trial date in this case. The next deadline that has to happen, UNM and New Mexico State now have to formally answer the complaint. So the complaint is the operative document filed by FOG that, apprises UNM and New Mexico State of the claims, the allegations in the lawsuit. And now that the university's motion to dismiss has been denied, they have to formally answer that. I'm not sure. There may be some pending discovery going on between the parties, but that's kind of what's at play right now, Dad.
Do you see a day where there's going to be uniformity throughout college basketball? I mean, this is a case, I think you and I talked about it. Son, you're the lawyer, man. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. You are. But will there be uniformity in college athletics when it comes to NIL? Remember, and you mentioned, I think this to me earlier today, unless Congress enacts something, they had mentioned about maybe President Trump and talked about getting involved, and then maybe Congress. There's the horse has left the barn. This thing is, it is what it is right now. Do you see a time when someone comes in and says, we've got to fix this and this is how we're going to do it? Or is this just going to be a runaway train for a while?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Dad. And I think when you say we got to fix this, I think you're just talking about the whole ecosystem as it exists right now, right? Like, all the turnover with rosters. That's what you mean, right, Dad?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
the NIL and, the records being released, things like that, because they all tie into each other. They all tie in.
Yeah, God, college athletics is in such a terrible position legally now. I think you kind of brought up the issue of like the volatility with roster turnover and stuff. I mean, I think, the people are waiting to see if Congress is going to pass some federal legislation that will hopefully slow some of these lawsuits down. What the NCAA needs, what a lot of expert legal commentators have said, they need an antitrust exemption, similar to what the MLB and some other professional leagues have, that allows the NCAA to restrict competition a little bit, restrict that marketplace, enforce some rules, tighten up some of these eligibility requirements. And I think you're starting to see that. The Division I Board of Directors is going to vote on May 22nd on that 5-to-play-5 rule. So I think you see the NCAA trying to do that. But in answer to that part of your question, Dad, until Congress acts one way or the other, whether it's on collective bargaining, whether it's on the antitrust exemption. Congress needs to act to stop that. And then as far as the uniformity with the public records being disclosed, I'm not sure, Dad. I don't know if you're ever going to see that. Perhaps Congress can legislate that as well, but there's probably some issues there that, I would have to research. But like I said, all these state laws have different specific exemptions within their public records statute. Colorado up north has exempted these kinds of records. If I lived in Colorado Springs and sent a public records request to Colorado State and Colorado University for all their revenue sharing contracts, I don't think I could get those under Colorado law. But under New Mexico law, I can, because they're not, well, I can't say I can, but UNM doesn't have that exemption to rely on. And what they're arguing about legally, as our commenter, Steve Singletary, 2126, always appreciate you, Steve. Under FERPA, the student athlete would have to give permission to share the information. That is true. That is what FERPA says. This particular argument about FERPA kind of involves a different interpretation. The universities are concerned. I think first, probably, they don't want to give up a student's information. I think, Steve, that is absolutely true. That part, that the FERPA statute does require both the student athlete and I believe their parents to give permission. But that being said, UNM doesn't want to develop a practice of doing that because they could risk losing their federal funding. So that's another piece of this too. There's also some sections in the Code of Federal Regulations that kind of talk about this. But yeah, Dad, I don't think we're going to see uniformity on the public records requests. We'll see what happens here in New Mexico. This is going to take a lot of time. I think, the win means the case gets to go forward. And now the parties get to fight about, what information is going to be shared to further litigate the case.
You know what? A lot still to. We wanted to have you on briefly tonight, son. We're not going to. Broad touch on. We just touched on the basics here about the case. There's certainly things you can't talk about. We understand that. Eric, did you have anything else for Nick as far as the case?
No, nothing else. I think just joining kind of the general census here as we're just waiting for more information to come out, more details, things like that. But nice job covering it, Nick.
Yeah, for sure, guys, for sure.
Yeah,
I hate to taint a perfectly good show about baseball and sports with all this.
No. I think Nick, it was in the paper. I think it's it's fitting. You're mentioned as a Pitt Press journalist, and you're also a Pitt Press broadcaster. So I think it was important that we mention that. But Eric, going forward, we talked about some new content. Maybe we haven't met yet, but anything you want to share with our viewers about what we might be seeing here in the future with the Pitt Press?
Yeah, a few things we've got kind of more keyed up. It's really just about pulling it all together. But I know we're really wanted to hand over back to you the Lobo Legend Series and start a Lobo Women Legend Series and maybe partner with Yvonne Sanchez to get some ex-players on and kind of talk about the Lobo Women a little bit more. I know we got Greg Archuleta, who's going to be helping us out more during the football season, really kind of when fall camp kicks off. We'll probably get more coverage there, maybe some sprinkled in coverage over the summer. And then we really want to ramp up kind of our high school coverage too. So getting more athletes on over the summer, kind of check in from around the state. And we have some connections down south to get some more athletes on from southern New Mexico too. So that's kind of what we're thinking. I know that we're always kind of brainstorming different ideas coming forth. So once we know more, we'll share more with you guys.
Yeah, it's exciting. I think some of the things we've got coming up, and I was reached out to by Vladimir McCrary. None of you guys wouldn't remember him, but he played with Kahari Jackson, strong lefty, and he reached out. He lives in Paris, and he reached out after he saw Kahari on the show and wants to come on. And you should hear this guy talk, man. Smooth DJ voice. And so it'd be interesting to know, hey, man, why are you in France? What are you doing in France? So maybe it's not every Lobo we're going to have on will be a legend. Though, some of them were very solid, but not legendary. But maybe a series like Where Are They Now? Like Sports Illustrated used to do. That used to be a real cool series when Sports Illustrated, I'd read it and like, oh, man, who'd they do it on? William the Refrigerator Perry, Roberto Duran, all kinds of different, Icky Woods. And you'd like, oh, shoot, I forgot about those guys. So I think a Lobo series like that, along with our Lobo Legend series, would also would be something that I think people would like, and add more content to the Pit Press and what we do, because we do quite a bit. And I'm glad we hadn't done a Deep in the Dugout for about a year, and we just got too busy with Lobo stuff. And I'm glad we had Dylan on. You had mentioned that last year, Eric, to get him on. So I think there's exciting things coming up with the Pit Press, and hopefully we'll get to go down to Las Vegas this summer and cover the football media days. We had a great time the last 2 years doing that. That was a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll be able to go down there, and football right around the corner as well. The UNM softball team, John Romero, said they first postseason appearance in 20 years. They're victorious over Fresno State 7-2 today. They advanced. So that's great news for UNM softball. They're again, their first postseason appearance in 20 years. So congratulations to the UNM softball team. They'll move on. I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight, guys. Unless you got anything else, son or Eric.
Oh, good show. It was a lot of fun. Again, Dylan Blancer, man, keep your eye out for him. That kid's a stud, and looking forward to joining Nick on Saturday. You guys tear it up on Friday evening. You were going to have a great time. For Dylan Blancer, our very special guest in Deep in the Dugout, Nick Nunez, Eric Moulton, I'm Ed Nunez. Thank you for watching the Pit Press Live. We'll see you next time.